Good morning, everybody. When the Great Depression started in 1929, one of the big questions was, what's the government going to do? And it was out of the context of the Great Depression that the Social Security system was set up, and it was on this date, August 14, in 1935, that Franklin Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act. Up until about 1900, most Americans lived on farms or in small communities, rural communities, and taking care of older people was up to the family or the community. And that was how it worked. As we became more urbanized and moved into the cities, particularly crowded areas, it was harder and harder to deal with the aging population, how to take care of grandpa and grandma, for instance. Now, there was insurance, like here's a certificate for fire insurance, but the idea of insurance that was for people who were simply older was really unusual. And the idea was if you could work, you worked until you couldn't anymore. And the idea of retirement at, say, 65 with some kind of income was just unheard of. Now, the government had set up a pension plan for Civil War veterans and eventually the spouses of veterans. So there was a government pension program, but it was limited. When the stock market crashed in October of 1929 and the Great Depression began, there were lots of questions about the viability of capitalism. Does a free market really work? There was a lot of desperation. So when Franklin Roosevelt was elected in 1932, he had vague ideas about how to pull us out of the Great Depression, but nobody really knew what the answer was. So the Roosevelt administration tried all kinds of things. Collectively, they are known as the New Deal. Perhaps you're familiar with the Works Progress Administration or the Civilian Conservation Corps. And this is the context of Social Security, the New Deal. Now, there was an idea floating around the country called the Townsend Plan, which called for $200 a month to be paid to older people. And this really interested Franklin Roosevelt. So he had a committee set up, and our event on this date, August 14, 1935, here he is signing the bill, and behind him you see a woman with a black hat. That's Frances Perkins, the Secretary of Labor. But she was head of the committee that basically wrote the Social Security legislation. So here's the card. Initially, the first three digits were based on your zip code, the middle two, a subset of that group, and then the last four digits, a serial number. But it got randomized in 2011, so it was harder to counterfeit. So how do you pay for Social Security? Well, look at your check stub. There's a line item there for Social Security tax. And that's still how it's funded today, more or less. Now, in the original plan, there was a setup for children, aid to children. This was administered by the states, so it was an example of the feds and the states working together. But there were many groups that were not covered, like farmers and farm laborers and school teachers. And it's surprising how many people were not covered in that original Social Security. But changes came early. One was there should be Social Security for spouses. So the spousal benefit was added early on, and then dependents of Social Security recipients was added. And these two were added almost right away. And then another addition that we still have today is the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, changes each year kind of based on inflation, the amount you get for Social Security. Congress initially had its own pension, but in 1984 that was changed, so now members of Congress also have Social Security like the rest of us, and that's a good thing, I think. So the first person to receive a Social Security check was Ida Mae Fuller of Vermont. Her number was 001010001, and she received $22.54 a month until she died in 1975. So for older people today, Social Security is a big part of their financial life and still remains very important for our older people.